This video is about going Ampless. Going Ampless is or was a scary prospect and something that took me a few goes at to really enjoy, if that's the word for it. What I'm going to talk about today is the different approaches to going Ampless, how to deal with the monitoring of your sound, and how to work professionally throughout that process. What would you want to try out and what would work for different people? So let's just start by saying I'm a tube amp guy. I love my tube amps. So pre-pandemic, I was using a tube amp all the time. Pretty soon after the pandemic, I was going to venues where the sound engineers were saying, you can't bring that onto the stage. You need to be DIing from something. And I was starting to get dep gigs where people were saying, you've got to have your own in-ear monitors. So the tide was turning for the working musician, and that's the level that I'm at, where I'm getting, gigs. Sometimes I'm just filling in for somebody. Sometimes it's my own band, but we would get there and the venue demanded to have in-ear monitoring. So that's what drove it. Since doing that, I've found that there is a nice convenience to bringing a pedal board, but a lot of it's about making it work for you and being creative, being able to get the tone that you want and being happy with that sound. So let's have a look at it. So the first thing I want to talk about when going Ampless is what kind of system you're going to use. So the way it works is you'll have something that models the sound of the amp, and then from that you'll need some kind of device that will model they call it an impulse response, but it essentially simulates the cabinet in a room, and that sometimes involves the sounds of microphones. It sometimes involves the way a room sounds. Round about 10 years ago, the Kemper profiler become really prominent in the scene of music recording and gigging, and a lot of my friends still use Kempers, and they are regarded as one of the best ways to go if you're literally having this kind of ampless sound. They profile amps that already have a great sound. I'm looking at some different kind of technology in this video, but it all applies. It's all the same kind of stuff. First thing you want to decide is if you're coming from an existing rig, an existing setup, or are you going to start fresh and keep your tube set up, keep that in your studio, keep it for rehearsals, keep it for when you just want to play loud, and then have something there that you can augment already onto your pedal board. Bits of equipment that work well are the UAFX. So I have two UAFX units currently that I like to use. One is the Woodrow. So the Woodrow is a 55, based on a 55 Deluxe Fender. Has a wonderful mid-range to it, has a wonderful clean sound, and it has a wonderful driven sound. It's the amp that can do anything. Secondly, I have the UAFX LION. That is based on an amp as well, and that has a wonderful sound too. Sounds like a 100 watt Marshall in the room. So those can be added to a pedal board, and it's essentially like having a little amplifier on your board. It will deal with your sound, but you can just plug that straight into the desk, into the PA, or you can plug it into a DI box. Some people like a DI box because it can go into an XLR connection straight to the snake, or the multi-core as people call it, and you're kind of rolling there. You can put a ground lift in if you want to do that, which is quite useful on some stages I've found. So that is an excellent way to go. And then other ways that you can go are sort of bigger modelling units. So I used to use a Line 6 Helix, a big full floorboard, fantastic bit of equipment. I have my own frustrations with stuff like that because you can build all your sounds at home and get it sounding absolutely great, but when you get to the venue there's still some tweaking to be done sometimes based on the EQ or what, sometimes it's just to address certain things the way they sound in that system. So with that in mind, I find stuff where you've got to twiddle knobs, save them, can be quite frustrating, because sometimes when you're in that time you need to get the sound straight away. You haven't got time to be going through menus and looking for stuff. So I do use the HX effects as part of my pedal board now, but I combine that with either a Lion or a Woodrow on my pedal board to just get that sound that I'm after. My pedal board's too big to fly with, so I have this for flights. This is my little pedal board that I made with my father-in-law, and it houses one of these. This is a Hotone or a Hotone Ampero Mini. I can build a set of sounds on there, and then I've got this little thing here to switch between. I could activate basically some effects pedals on there. So the Hotone works great as a one-stop pedal board that can fit in a case or in an overnight bag, and has a built-in DI with ground lift, just in case the sound on the stage is noisy and there's a ground loop issue. So I've found that that's been quite a useful bit of kit. So when you're building something like this, you have to have considerations to the power that you're using. Most things with a screen on will have at least 500 milliamps to 1 amp of power needed, because the screen will need all of that power to keep it going. The same with anything really that's amp based. It tends to need a little bit more power to give that kind of headroom and that sound, especially digital technology. So bear that in mind when you're building a board and you're trying to get the sound that you want. So if I was starting from scratch again, without any pedals that are analog, I would look at the Line 6 Helix if you just wanted a board to rock up with. If you want, the Quad Cortex is also great. The reason why that is great is because it's touchscreen, so you can literally, get your Quad Cortex out, make a change on the screen. That's another reason why I like the Hotone. The Hotone, again, Ampero, they do bigger Hotone Ampero stuff. The Ampero Stomp's really good, so you can go for stuff like this. The Line 6 HX Stomp, again, is one of the ultimate pedals. You can stick it on a pedal board, or you could just take that to a gig. So I recommend things like that if you're starting from scratch. If you're in a low budget, there are some great options from Donna. Hotone would be my personal favourite on the budget end of the spectrum, and Veilton. I found with the first iteration of Veilton, you couldn't alter certain things. You couldn't have like 2 drives on at once, things like that. But I would assume that that's been changed, because that's something that guitar players want, right? How do these things sound? So people compare them to tube amps, and it's a digital thing versus an analog thing. It's really hard to test that. I don't think you're going to get to the answer. It will probably be that it sounds very close, but it's great that you can, unload your car in one trip at the end of the night, which actually matters to people who play guitar and do gigs quite frequently, because if you start leaving your guitars and belongings behind while you're loading up, they're more likely to get stolen. And that's a fact. I come from doing years and years of carrying things upstairs and into venues and out of venues and back home and out the car or out the van. It's nice to have everything that can fit in one trip, really. And that's what the modelling technology and the Ampless technology lends itself towards. So let's just have a look at the sound comparison. So what I've got here, I'm going to run something. This is my Woodrow. Okay, just going to run my Woodrow. And then I'm going to run my Hotone Mini with the same amp. Okay, so this is where we're comparing the quality of sound between the two things here. So okay, so from there, you know, the Woodrow, which costs quite a lot more than a Hotone Mini, sounds a bit more, but all it does is the sound of the Woodrow. Did you notice how I could change those parameters and the whole thing reacted like an amp? That's part of the appeal of units like such. And the great thing is I could plug that into the effects loop of a tube amp and have a bit more of that fun. Or I could plug it into a flat frequency response and it will sound great too. Hotone's good for practice, it gets me in the ballpark, and I've got a little headphone jack on the Hotone, which is, you know, something that the Woodrow doesn't have. Okay, so I just want to talk about how you're going to hear this stuff when you're out live. So this is about FRFRs, in-ear monitors and other options. If you run a tube amp, something like a Hot Rod Deluxe, you know, you will have an effects loop. You can plug a modeling unit into the return of the effects loop. It will bypass the preamp of the amp and you can have access to all of those things, and it's almost like running your tube amp as a response unit, as a monitor. It sounds great. You've got a lot of control. You can do things, say if you had a Helix, you could run one output into the PA with a cab simulator on it or an IR, and you could just run one without to the effects return, and it will have a really great kind of sound on stage. So you'll be happy there with your on stage sound, and you'll be happy with your out the front sound as well. And it doesn't, you know, you could have that cab or speaker anywhere you want on stage. A lot of people opt to bring their own little FRFR to have on stage. A friend of mine uses the Laney. He's really happy with the Laney one with the light on it. Some of my friends use the Head Rush. There's an 8-inch Head Rush that's very light, very small. You can pop it on the front of the stage. My favourite thing to do, if I'm a loud sound on stage, is use my Deluxe Reverb and bypass the modelling, or add the modelling unit to just augment it and turn the amp piece off. So if I'm using my pedal board, I can just turn the amp cab sim off on the Woodrow or on the Lion, and I've got like a little preamp there that I can activate if I want that sound. Hi, please subscribe to the videos. We've got a wicked giveaway at the moment where once we get 1,000 subscribers, we'll do a prize draw, and I'll be sending out a Mosky Zen Drive clone, which is a really fantastic little pedal. The cool thing about using tube amps, you know, is you've still got that lovely tube response. You can get some really great sounds doing that. You can use an FRFR by all means, but if you've already got a tube amp, why buy another thing? In-ear monitors is the other thing, or just not bringing anything at all and using the PA wedge. They can just put a wedge out for you and assign that to you. That's great as well. The only thing I find with that is, depending on what band you're with, some people Sometimes you just want to check some of your settings or some of your bits and pieces on your rig, and you're at the mercy of your sound engineer when you decide to do that. So you've got to either ask them to turn it on or wait for them to give you that control. A lot of people will opt for in-ear monitors. There's not a hell of a lot of information about in-ear monitoring. It's probably not the most exciting thing here with guitars, but it's something that we have to do. This is a in-ear monitor amplifier. Pretty much every stage in the world's probably got one of these around. A Behringer, runs on AAA batteries, has an XLR or jack input, and then you plug your in-ear monitor here, and it's got a volume, and that basically will power the sound to your in-ear monitors. And you can plug that into an XLR on stage. So if you're in a stationary position, or if you're recording with one, these are great because you can control that on your person. You've got a lot of control when you're in the session. So a lot of people will have one of these in their bag to use. And then you need to choose your in-ear monitors. So quite a mid-range one is the MEE Professional. These are the M6 Pros. These monitors come in a nice little case with some different sized pieces to go into your ears, and I've been using these on the road for 3 years now, and they still work great. What they do, they have a number of drivers, and this is what you're thinking about when you're buying in-ear monitors, is the amount of drivers, because they will drive certain frequencies. The bass frequency on lower, cheaper in-ear monitors tends to get lost, and I find that I lose the bass player when I have them in if I'm not using my M6s. Some of my friends use Ultimate Ear and they're molded to their ears. They're absolutely fantastic. I use them for my motorcycling. So those are really cool. I'm going to show you a little hack now. This is my wireless guitar hack to use in-ear monitors without your own packs. Now I do carry my own packs sometimes, but most of the gigs that I do, the sound team will bring their own packs and be responsible for those and the batteries. So after at soundcheck I'll get handed a pack. But basically, here's my in-ear monitors. Okay. If I am in the wild, I'm out by myself, I can use this. I can plug in the amplifier piece into this. I can plug that in. So I've got my in-ear monitors with me. That'll be on a belt or something, or down my jacket. And this will go to the PA and transmit the audio frequency. It's in mono. Okay, it's in mono. But that is something that you can do as a little hack if you've not got a lot of money and you just want to try it out, because it's enough for you to try it out really if you're doing that. Most gigs now, the sound is controlled by a digital desk. So whether that's Midas, Behringer, Allen and Heath, they'll all have a different app to control the sound. And what's really cool, and has been cool for the last 2 to 3 years, is that when you get the gigs and you're doing your sound check, you could download an app and control your own in-ear mix. So SQ4 is one of those pieces of software. There's quite a few others which I'm going to list here. But if you're going to do some of your first gigs, download those already. So when you get to the venue, you'll be given a password and a login to the sound engineering system. You can then operate your own mix. I did a show New Year's Eve. I brought my daughter with me. She's 7. She had her iPad. She had Q-Mix on her iPad, and she did my in-ear mix for me, which was quite entertaining. It's really it's so straightforward. Like a 7-year-old can do it, and they can really get into it. So that's another thing that you might want to think about as well. So for a recap, there's a few considerations you might want to make if you're going to go Ampless. Think about the technologies you want to use. Do you want it really simple? You can buy amp pedals and separate IR loaders, which are, they can be quite cheap actually, and they'll have an XLR output built into them. Stuff like that's absolutely brilliant because it's a low cost alternative to get you out there doing it. I love tube amps and I love having an amp on stage, but it can't always be a reality. So stuff like this just makes it better. I'm an absolute advocate for the UAFX pedals purely because I can see where the knobs are at and I can move them intuitively like an amp, and they feel and they really are as close to using an amp in terms of the whole experience. Instead of going through menus and things, it's laid out like it. I know that they have a design language that's a little bit kind of like almost like Apple stuff. It's like it's kind of sleek, it's really nicely designed, and you're paying a lot for that, and they are quite expensive, but they really are an inspirational piece of equipment. And just personally, I find that inspirational compared to digital screens and things like that, even though under the hood it's probably the same kind of technology. It's interesting how good low cost options are these days, and they're worth investigating. And the cool thing with music gear is like this: if you buy it and you're not too, it works and it gets you by, that's cool. If you're not too into it, you can move it on. You're not going to lose too much money on it, especially if you use it for a gig, and then after that, you've earned some money by using it. So there we have it. There's my little guide to going Ampless. What do you all think? It'd be quite interesting to know if people still like using amps and will never give up on the amp thing. Are some people leaning into it and happy and exciting about the new way of doing things? I must say, I miss, having a really loud 4x12 on stage. I don't miss having my ears ring on the way home and all night thereafter. I don't miss how the effects that takes on you and on your body, but I do miss that visceral energy that you get from playing really loud. But this technology is cool, and it's not the same experience as with the Lion. It's not the same as having a 100 watt Marshall in the same room. It just isn't. But it does sound great, and it does inspire, and it does come from the same kind of place. The other night, I bought my Lion. I got this out, and I just put on like some Led Zeppelin. I put on How the West Was Won, and sort of as a teenager, I literally like studied that album and learned to play the whole thing. And I had a Squire Telecaster to do it on. But to me, it was just one of the great sounding albums. It's been nice doing it with a Les Paul, but it has inspired me to play more. Hopefully that might have answered some questions. Be excellent to each other and please subscribe.